The gunshot echoed across the empty plains as Harriet Holloway ducked behind an overturned wagon, her heart hammering against her ribs like a wild Mustang. April 1867 had brought nothing but misfortune since she'd left Boston for the frontier town of Redemption Creek, Colorado. Now bandits were raiding the stagecoach that was meant to be her safe passage to a new life. "Stay down, miss!" The stagecoach driver's warning came seconds before another shot rang out, splintering wood inches from her face. Harriet clutched her medical bag tighter to her chest. 3 years as a nurse during the Civil War had taught her to remain calm in chaos. But this was different. This was lawless country where her skills as a physician meant nothing if she couldn't survive the journey. The sound of approaching hoofbeats cut through the gunfire. Through the settling dust, she glimpsed a lone rider charging toward the skirmish, rifle raised. With precision that spoke of military training, the stranger picked off 2 bandits in rapid succession, causing the others to scatter like startled crows. "You folks all right?" The man's voice was deep, graveled by years of tobacco and hard living as he dismounted with noticeable difficulty. His right leg moved stiffly as he approached, and Harriet immediately recognized the telltale signs of an old war wound. "Just shaken," the driver called back, emerging from his hiding place. "Mighty fine timing, mister." Harriet stood, brushing dust from her traveling dress. The stranger's eyes found hers steel blue beneath the shadow of his worn Stetson. His face was weathered by sun and hardship, a scar running from his temple to his jaw. Not an old man, she realized, but one aged by experience rather than years. Perhaps 30, with dark blonde hair in need of a trim and a beard that couldn't quite hide the strong line of his jaw. "Madam," he acknowledged with a slight tip of his hat. "You're a fair piece from anywhere civilized." "I'm heading to Redemption Creek," she replied, straightening her spine. "I'm the new doctor." Something flickered in his eyes' surprise, perhaps disbelief before he masked it. "Doctor?" "Yes, Dr. Harriet Holloway." He seemed to consider this information before offering. "Frank Thorne. Most folks call me Thorne." He gestured toward the horizon. "Redemption Creek's my hometown. It's still 5 miles east. These roads aren't safe for traveling alone." The driver cleared his throat. "My wheels busted beyond repair, madam, and my shotgun messenger took a bullet in the shoulder." Harriet immediately moved to the wounded man. "Let me see him." As she tended to the guard's injury, she felt Thorne's gaze upon her. His limp became more pronounced as he gathered the reins of the dead bandits' horses, securing them to the back of his own mount. "I can escort you and your belongings to town," he finally said. "Got room at my ranch for these gentlemen to recover before continuing on." "That's mighty generous," the driver said with relief. Harriet finished bandaging the wounded guard. "I'd be grateful for the escort, Mr. Thorne." "Just Thorne," he corrected, helping load her trunks onto his horse. "Town's been waiting on a doctor since old Doc Willis passed last winter, though they weren't expecting—" He stopped himself. "A woman?" Harriet finished for him, arching an eyebrow. "I assure you, Mr. Thorne, my gender has never hindered my ability to set a bone or suture a wound." The corner of his mouth twitched almost a smile. "Wasn't implying it would, madam." The journey to Thorne's ranch was largely silent. She observed how he favored his left leg, the right one stiff, and clearly causing him pain with each step. When they arrived at a modest but well-maintained homestead, he helped her down from his horse with strong, calloused hands. "It's not much," he said, almost apologetically, "but it's clean." The interior of the cabin was indeed immaculate, if sparse. A table, chairs, a small kitchen area, and a sitting room with a stone fireplace. Through an open door, she glimpsed a bedroom. "You'll take my room," he stated, rather than offered. "I'll bunk with the hands in the bunkhouse." "That's not necessary," she began. "It is," he cut her off. "My mother would haunt me if I didn't offer a lady proper accommodation." Harriet studied him as he moved around the cabin, noticing how he gritted his teeth when his right leg bore his weight. Your injury was it from the war? Thorne stiffened. Gettysburg, Confederate artillery. His tone made it clear the subject was closed. Later that evening, after the wounded guard had been settled in the bunkhouse with the ranch hands, Harriet found herself sitting across from Thorne at his kitchen table. He'd prepared a simple but hearty stew. Why Redemption Creek? He asked suddenly. Most doctors, especially women doctors, stay in the cities. Harriet considered her answer carefully. After the war, I couldn't return to normal city life. Too many memories. Too many ghosts. She met his gaze. I wanted to go somewhere my skills were needed, where I could build something new. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. War changes you. Yes, it does. She hesitated before adding, I noticed you're in considerable pain with your leg. I could examine it. No. His response was immediate, sharp. His knuckles whitened around his spoon. I don't need doctoring, and I certainly don't need pity. Don't pity me, he added more quietly, his jaw tight. I get by fine. Harriet leaned forward, meeting his gaze squarely. Then let me care for you, she said simply. Not out of pity. As your doctor. Surprise flickered across his face, quickly replaced by wariness. I've had doctors. Army surgeons who wanted to take the whole leg. Town doctors who just gave me whiskey and laudanum. I'm neither, she replied firmly. I learned medicine in tents and field hospitals where innovations were born of necessity. If you won't let me look at it as your doctor, then allow me as repayment for your help today. Their eyes locked in a silent battle of wills. Finally, he pushed his chair back from the table. Fine. But don't make promises you can't keep, Dr. Holloway. Thorne rolled up his pant leg, revealing an angry patchwork of scarred flesh. The knee was misshapen, and when Harriet gently probed the area, she felt bone fragments that had healed improperly. How much pain? Daily? She asked, her professional demeanor masking her sympathy. Manageable, he grunted. That's not a measure, she countered. Scale of 1 to 10. He exhaled slowly. 6 on good days. 8, sometimes 9 when the weather turns. Harriet nodded, continuing her examination. The fragments are pressing on nerves. That's why the pain is so severe. And this muscle here, it's contracted from compensating. She looked up at him. I can help reduce the pain, maybe improve mobility, but it would take time. Regular treatments. Why would you bother? His voice was low, suspicious. Because it's my calling to heal, she answered honestly. And because no one should live with this level of pain if it can be helped. Something shifted in his expression, not quite trust, but perhaps the beginning of it. You're not what I expected, Dr. Holloway. I seldom am, Mr. Thorne. She smiled slightly. Now I'll need hot water, clean cloths, and any whiskey you can spare. For the next hour, Harriet worked methodically, massaging the contracted muscles, applying hot compresses, and showing Thorne exercises that would help maintain what mobility he had. By the time she finished, some of the tension had visibly left his body. Better? She asked. He flexed his knee experimentally, surprise crossing his features. Yes, still hurts, but differently. Less sharp. With regular treatment, we might be able to reduce your pain by half, she said, packing away her supplies, and perhaps improve your range of motion. Thorne was quiet for a long moment. Thank you, he finally said, the words clearly unfamiliar on his tongue. You're welcome, she replied simply. We should reach town by tomorrow afternoon, yes? I'm eager to see my new home. A shadow passed over his face. About that. Redemption Creek's a good town, but set in its ways. A female doctor will raise eyebrows. I'm accustomed to raised eyebrows, Mr. Thorne. Harriet smiled wryly. They usually lower once people realize I can actually help them. The following morning dawned clear and bright. Harriet woke to the sounds of activity outside, men's voices, horses, the clang of metal. When she emerged from the bedroom, she found Thorne at the stove, frying bacon. "Morning," he greeted her, not turning around. "Coffee's hot." "Thank you." She poured herself a cup, watching him move about the kitchen. His limp seemed less pronounced this morning. "How's the leg?" "Better," he admitted. "First night in months I slept through." Harriet felt a surge of professional satisfaction. "Good. The exercises I showed you, try to do them daily." They ate breakfast mostly in silence, but it was a comfortable one. Afterward, Thorne helped load her belongings onto a wagon he'd prepared. "The injured men will stay here a few days," he explained. "My foreman will see they get to the next town safely." The journey to Redemption Creek took most of the morning. As they crested a hill, the town spread below them, a single main street with businesses on either side, surrounded by scattered homesteads and farms. It wasn't large, perhaps 50 buildings in all, but it had a church, a schoolhouse, and what appeared to be a busy mercantile. "It's lovely," Harriet said sincerely. Thorne glanced at her. "It's small, rough sometimes, but good people mostly." As they rode down the main street, Harriet was aware of curious eyes following them. Thorne guided the wagon to a white clapboard building with a small sign that read, "Doctor's Office." This was Doc Willis's place, he explained. "Living quarters upstairs, examination rooms below." He hesitated. "Town council's been keeping it maintained, hoping for a new doctor." A small crowd had begun to gather as they pulled up. A portly man with an impressive mustache stepped forward. "Thorne, didn't expect you in town today?" His eyes flickered curiously to Harriet. "Mayor Simmons," Thorne acknowledged. "This is Dr. Harriet Holloway, your new town doctor." The mayor's bushy eyebrows shot up. "Doctor? But you're a woman." "Yes, I'm aware," Harriet said pleasantly, extending her hand. "A pleasure to meet you, Mayor. I understand you've been without medical care for some months." The mayor looked flustered but shook her hand. "Well, yes, but we were expecting. That is, the advertisement didn't specify." "My qualifications?" Harriet supplied. 3 years as a field surgeon during the war, followed by 2 years at Boston Women's Hospital. I assure you, I'm fully trained." The mayor glanced helplessly at Thorne, who stood impassively beside the wagon. "Dr. Holloway patched up Jenkins from the stagecoach line yesterday when bandits attacked," Thorne said. "And she's already done more for my leg than any doctor since the war." This statement caused a ripple of surprise through the gathered townspeople. Everyone knew Thorne's leg was a lost cause. He'd made that clear to anyone who'd ever suggested treatment. The mayor cleared his throat. "Well, I suppose we can give you a trial period." "Mayor Simmons," Harriet interrupted firmly. "I didn't travel 2,000 miles for a trial period. I came because your town needed a doctor and offered a permanent position. If that's changed, I should know now before I unpack." A tense silence fell over the crowd. Then a woman's voice called out from the back. "My Tommy's had a fever for 3 days. Can you look at him, doctor?" Harriet turned toward the voice, a weary-looking woman holding a flushed child of about 6. "Of course," she said immediately. "Let's get him inside." Without waiting for further discussion, she retrieved her medical bag from the wagon and approached the woman. "What's your name?" "Sarah Miller, madam. This is Tommy." Harriet placed a gentle hand on the boy's forehead. "Hello, Tommy. Let's see what's troubling you, shall we?" She guided mother and child toward the doctor's office. Behind her, she heard Thorne's voice. "Well, Mayor, are you going to unlock the door for the doctor, or should I break it down?" The next few hours passed in a blur as Harriet examined the feverish boy, diagnosed a throat infection, and prescribed a treatment of honey mixed with willow bark tea. Word spread quickly, and by mid-afternoon, 6 more patients had arrived seeking treatment for various ailments: a rancher with an infected hand, a pregnant woman concerned about swelling, an elderly man with joint pain. Thorne stayed, quietly unloading her trunks and arranging her belongings in the upstairs living quarters. When the last patient had been seen, Harriet climbed the stairs, exhausted but satisfied. She found Thorne in the small kitchen, heating water on the stove. "Thought you might want tea," he said gruffly. "Busy, first day." "Thank you." She sank into a chair, removing the pins from her hair with a sigh of relief. "The town seems cautiously accepting." "You impress them," Thorne said, setting a steaming cup before her. "Not just with your doctoring, with your backbone." Harriet smiled tiredly. Essential equipment for a female physician. Thorne remained standing, shifting his weight uncomfortably. "I should get back to the ranch." "Of course." She felt a surprising twinge of disappointment. "Thank you for your help today." He nodded, moving toward the door. Then he paused, turning back. "I could come by tomorrow." "For my leg," he clarified quickly. "The treatment." Harriet felt warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the tea. "I'd like that. 10 o'clock?" 10 o'clock, he agreed, and was gone. The next few weeks established a routine. Each morning, Harriet opened the clinic to a steady stream of patients. Word of her skills spread quickly through the surrounding countryside, bringing ranchers, farmers, and travelers seeking treatment. At precisely 10 o'clock every other day, Thorne would arrive for his therapy session. These sessions became something Harriet looked forward to with increasing anticipation. Gradually, Thorne began to open up first about his ranch, then about the town, and finally about himself. "I wasn't always a rancher," he told her one day as she worked on massaging his damaged knee. "Before the war, I studied law in St. Louis." Harriet's hand stilled momentarily in surprise. "Law? I wouldn't have guessed." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Not what you'd expect from a rough cowboy?" "Not at all what I'd expect," she agreed, resuming her ministrations. "What happened?" "War happened." His expression darkened. "Left school to enlist. By the time I came home, I couldn't imagine sitting in a stuffy office arguing over property lines and wills." "So you came west?" He nodded. "My uncle left me the ranch. It was run down, barely surviving. Rebuilding it gave me purpose when I didn't have much else." Harriet understood that feeling all too well. "The war took my fiancé," she found herself saying, "and 2 brothers. Medicine became my way of fighting back against all that loss." Their eyes met in a moment of shared understanding. Something had been building between them during these quiet sessions, a connection that went beyond doctor and patient. "You're good for this town," Thorne said suddenly. "People trust you." "Not everyone," Harriet replied, thinking of a few stubborn holdouts who still refused to be treated by a woman. "But enough to keep me busy." "More than busy. You need help," he observed. "An assistant, at least." The suggestion took root, and the following week, Harriet hired 16-year-old Lily Parker, a bright girl with a steady hand and keen interest in medicine, to help with record-keeping and preparations. Spring blossomed into summer, bringing with it new challenges. A mining accident in the hills brought a dozen injured men to her door at once. Harriet worked through the night, setting bones, stitching wounds, and monitoring the most critical patients. When dawn broke, she found Thorne asleep in a chair in the waiting room, having stayed to carry water, hold lamps, and offer whatever assistance she needed. "You should go home," she told him gently, touching his shoulder. "Get some real rest." He blinked awake, his hand automatically covering hers. "How are they?" "All stable. 2 will need ongoing care, but they'll live." Relief washed over his face. "And you? When did you last rest?" The concern in his voice warmed her more than it should have. "I'm fine." "Harriet." It was the first time he'd used her given name. "You can't help anyone if you collapse." The way he said her name sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with exhaustion. "I'll rest soon," she promised. He stood, wincing slightly as he put weight on his bad leg. "I'm taking you to breakfast first, no arguments." At the town's small cafe, they shared a quiet meal. Several townsfolk stopped by their table, thanking Harriet for her work with the injured miners. She noticed how Thorne watched her with something like pride in his eyes. "What?" she asked when they were alone again. "Just thinking about how different you are from what I expected when I heard a doctor was coming to town." "Disappointed?" she teased. His expression grew serious. "The opposite." The intensity of his gaze made her heart quicken. Before she could respond, the cafe door burst open and a frantic woman rushed in. "Dr. Holloway! My husband, he's been thrown from his horse. His head's bleeding something awful." Harriet was on her feet instantly. "Where is he?" "Our farm, just north of town." "I'll get my horse," Thorne said immediately. The injured farmer required stitches and monitoring for a concussion. By the time Harriet and Thorne returned to town, it was late afternoon. Standing outside the clinic, an awkward silence fell between them. "Thank you for your help today," Harriet said finally. "Any time." He hesitated, then added, "There's a social at the church this Saturday. Dancing, food. The whole town will be there." He cleared his throat. "You should come. Get to know more folks." Harriet raised an eyebrow. "Is that an invitation, Mr. Thorne?" Color crept up his neck. "If you want it to be." She smiled. "Then I accept." Saturday arrived clear and warm. Harriet spent more time than usual preparing, selecting a blue dress that brought out her eyes and arranging her hair in a softer style than her usual practical bun. When a knock came at her door precisely at 6, her pulse quickened. Thorne stood on her porch, freshly shaved, wearing a clean shirt and vest. His eyes widened appreciatively as they took her in. "You look beautiful," he said simply. The compliment, delivered without artifice, made her cheeks warm. "Thank you. You clean up rather well yourself." He offered his arm, and she took it, noticing that his limp was less pronounced than it had been when they first met. The therapy was working. The church social was in full swing when they arrived. Lanterns hung from trees, casting a warm glow over tables laden with food. A small band played lively tunes, and several couples were already dancing. Their entrance together caused a few curious glances, but Harriet was pleased to note most were friendly. Over the past months, she'd won over most of the town with her skill and dedication. "Dr. Holloway!" Mayor Simmons approached, his wife beside him. "Wonderful to see you joining our festivities." "I wouldn't miss it," Harriet replied warmly. "And Thorne can't remember the last time you attended a social." The mayor winked. "Good to see you out and about." They mingled, Harriet accepting introductions to people she hadn't yet met professionally. Thorne remained close, his hand occasionally touching the small of her back in a gesture that felt both protective and possessive. When the band struck up a waltz, Thorne turned to her. "Would you dance with me?" Harriet glanced at his leg. "Are you sure?" "I've been doing my exercises," he said with a small smile. "Besides, some things are worth a little pain." On the makeshift dance floor, he pulled her closer than propriety strictly allowed. "I should warn you," he murmured. "I haven't done this since before the war." "I'll lead if necessary," she teased. To her surprise, he moved with grace, guiding her confidently through the steps. His hand was warm and steady against her back, and she found herself leaning into his touch. "You're full of surprises, Frank Thorne," she said softly, using his first name for the first time. Something flickered in his eyes, desire perhaps, or a deeper emotion she wasn't ready to name. "So are you, Harriet Holloway." As they swayed to the music, the rest of the gathering seemed to fade away. There was only his arms around her, his eyes holding hers, and the undeniable connection that had been growing between them since that first day on the dusty road. When the music ended, Neither moved immediately to break apart. Finally, Thorne cleared his throat. Would you like some punch? Yes, thank you. As he walked away, Sarah Miller approached, little Tommy by her side. You two make a handsome couple, Doctor. Harriet felt her cheeks warm. Oh, we're not. Sarah smiled knowingly. Not yet, perhaps. But I've known Frank Thorne for 5 years, and I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. Before Harriet could respond, a commotion erupted near the food tables. Raised voices, then a crash. Instinctively, she moved toward the disturbance. 3 men strangers by the look of them were confronting Thorne. One had knocked over a punch bowl, and another was poking Thorne in the chest aggressively. Think you're so high and mighty now, the largest man was saying. Forgotten where you come from, Thorne? Thorne's expression was hard, his body tense. I told you before, Dawson, I want nothing to do with your operation. And I told you that wasn't an option. The man Dawson lowered his voice, but Harriet was close enough to hear. Your land borders the pass. We need access. Find another route for your smuggling, Thorne said coldly, and get out of this town. Dawson's face darkened. You'll regret this. His eyes shifted, landing on Harriet. A slow, unpleasant smile spread across his face. Well, what have we here? The lady doctor I've been hearing about? Thorne moved immediately, placing himself between Harriet and Dawson. Leave her out of this. Touched a nerve, have I? Dawson's smile widened. Interesting. Mayor Simmons and several other men were approaching now. Is there a problem here, gentlemen? Dawson's demeanor changed instantly, becoming affable. No problem, Mayor. Just catching up with an old war buddy. He clapped Thorne on the shoulder, who stiffened but didn't react. We'll be on our way. Town's not as hospitable as we'd hoped. With a final, meaningful look at Thorne, Dawson and his companions departed. The festive atmosphere had been dampened. Thorne's expression was closed, his jaw tight as he watched the men leave. Who were they? Harriet asked quietly when they were alone. No one you need to worry about. His tone was clipped. Frank, she pressed, if there's trouble. There isn't. He cut her off. Not anymore. He exhaled slowly, visibly forcing himself to relax. I'm sorry. Would you like to continue dancing? But the evening's magic had been broken. Though they remained at the social for another hour, Thorne was distracted, his gaze frequently scanning the darkness beyond the lantern light. When he walked her home, an uncomfortable tension stretched between them. At her door, Harriet turned to face him. Are you going to tell me what that was really about? Thorne ran a hand through his hair. It's complicated. I'm quite intelligent, she said dryly. I'm sure I can follow along. That earned her a brief smile before his expression sobered. Dawson and I served together. After the war, he formed a gang. Smuggling, mostly. Some robbery. He's been trying to use my land as a route for moving stolen goods south to Mexico. Harriet felt a chill. And tonight? A warning. Thorne's eyes met hers, troubled. Harriet, I don't want you involved in this. I'm already involved, she pointed out. If only because I care about you. The words hung between them, more revealing than she'd intended. Thorne's expression softened, and he reached up to brush a strand of hair from her face. I care about you too, he said quietly, which is why I need to handle this myself. Before she could argue, he leaned down and pressed his lips to hers, a gentle, questioning kiss that quickly deepened as she responded. His arms encircled her waist, pulling her closer, and she felt the solid strength of him against her. When they finally parted, both were breathing heavily. Thorne rested his forehead against hers. I've wanted to do that for weeks, he admitted. Why didn't you? She asked, her hand still resting on his chest. Wasn't sure a refined lady doctor would welcome the attentions of a crippled rancher. Harriet pulled back slightly to meet his gaze. Don't call yourself that. And don't underestimate what this lady doctor welcomes. He smiled a real smile that transformed his face, before kissing her again, more thoroughly this time. When they parted, he stepped back, reluctantly. "I should go," he said. "But I'll see you tomorrow?" 10 o'clock, she confirmed. "Don't be late." As Harriet prepared for bed that night, her mind raced with thoughts of Thorne, his kiss, his touch, the way he looked at her as if she were something precious. But darker thoughts intruded as well. Dawson's threats, Thorne's determination to handle the situation alone. She had seen enough of men's violence during the war to know when danger lurked. Whatever was between Thorne and Dawson would not simply disappear. The following morning, Harriet was checking her supplies when Lily burst through the door, her face pale with alarm. "Doctor, come quick! There's been a shooting at Mr. Thorne's ranch!" Harriet's heart seemed to stop. "Is he?" "It's not him," Lily said quickly. "It's one of his hands. But they're bringing him in now." Minutes later, 2 ranch hands carried in a third, a young man barely out of his teens, blood soaking his shirt from a bullet wound in his shoulder. "What happened?" Harriet demanded, already cutting away the bloodied fabric. "Riders came at dawn," one of the men explained. "Started shooting, set fire to the south pasture. Jimmy here was on watch." "Where's Mr. Thorne?" Harriet asked, probing the wound to locate the bullet. "Gone after them with some of the boys." Fear gripped her, but Harriet forced it down, focusing on the injured man before her. The bullet had missed major vessels but was lodged against the shoulder blade. It took nearly an hour to extract it, clean the wound, and stitch it closed. As she was finishing, the clinic door banged open. Thorne stood there, his face streaked with soot, a bloody gash across his forehead. Relief flooded through Harriet, followed immediately by concern. "Sit down before you fall down," she ordered, pointing to an examination table. Thorne glanced at the injured ranch hand. "Jimmy? He'll recover," Harriet assured him, guiding him to the table. "Now it's your turn." As she cleaned the cut on his forehead, her hands trembled slightly. "What happened?" "Dawson," Thorne said grimly, "left a clear trail south. Wants me to follow." "And will you?" She applied antiseptic, noting his wince. "Have to. He'll keep coming otherwise." Harriet set down her cloth. "This is madness. You need to go to the sheriff." "Sheriff can't do anything. Dawson operates across county lines, territory boundaries." Thorne caught her hand. "I'll be fine. I know what I'm doing." "You're going to get yourself killed," she said, fear making her voice sharp. His expression softened. "I didn't survive Gettysburg to die at the hands of a 2-bit smuggler." "This isn't funny," Harriet said, pulling her hand away. "You can't just ride off on some vendetta. There are people here who—" She stopped, swallowing hard. "Who what?" he prompted gently. "Who care about you?" she finished, unable to say the words burning in her heart. "Who need you?" Thorne stood, pulling her into his arms despite the public setting. "I care about you too," he murmured against her hair. "More than I should. Which is why I need to end this. Make it safe." Harriet pushed against his chest, looking up at him fiercely. "Then don't go alone. Take men you trust. Make a plan." He studied her face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right. I'll talk to the mayor. Get some men together." He brushed his thumb along her cheek. "I won't be reckless. I have too much to come back for." The next 3 days were the longest of Harriet's life. Thorne and 10 other men from town had ridden out, following Dawson's trail south. No word had come back. She threw herself into her work, taking on extra patients, reorganizing her supplies, anything to keep her mind occupied. At night, she paced her small apartment, imagining every terrible possibility. On the 4th day, as she was closing the clinic, a rider appeared on the horizon. Her heart leapt, then plummeted as she realized it wasn't Thorne, but one of the townsmen who had gone with him. The man dismounted, his expression grim. "Doc, you better come. Thorne's hurt bad." They were camped 15 miles south, in a canyon where they'd cornered Dawson and his men. A shootout had ensued. Dawson was dead, along with 2 of his gang. The rest had been captured. But Thorne had taken a bullet to his good leg and fallen from a ridge. By the time Harriet reached the makeshift camp, night had fallen. Thorne lay on a bedroll near the fire, his face pale and drawn with pain. His left leg was splinted roughly, and blood had seeped through the bandages. "You stubborn, reckless man," she said, kneeling beside him, her voice breaking despite her attempt at sternness. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Hello to you too, doctor." Her professional training took over as she examined him. The bullet had gone clean through his thigh, missing the bone but causing significant blood loss. More concerning was his ankle, badly broken in the fall. "I need to reset this before we move him," she told the men gathered around. "And I need better light, clean water, and whiskey for him and for sterilizing my instruments." As she worked, Thorne watched her through pain-glazed eyes. "You shouldn't have come out here," he murmured. "Not safe." "Hush," she replied, concentrating on aligning the broken bones. "Did you really think I'd stay behind?" "Hoped," he admitted. "Didn't expect it." He hissed as she manipulated the ankle. "Always surprising me, Harriet Holloway." The journey back to town the next day was slow and painful. They fashioned a travois to carry Thorne, but every bump and jolt caused him visible agony. By the time they reached the clinic, he was feverish, drifting in and out of consciousness. For 3 days, Harriet barely left his side, fighting infection with every remedy at her disposal. When his fever finally broke on the 4th morning, she was dozing in a chair beside his bed. "You look terrible," his raspy voice woke her. Harriet blinked, then straightened. "Charming as ever, I see. How long have I been out?" He tried to sit up, wincing. 4 days, she said, helping him. "And if you undo all my careful work, I'll sedate you myself." Thorne caught her hand. "Thank you. For coming after me. For saving my leg." "Both your legs?" "Actually," she corrected with a small smile. "Though the next few months won't be pleasant. You'll need extensive rehabilitation." "Good thing I know an excellent doctor." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "One who cares for me." The echo of their first conversation wasn't lost on her. "Yes. Well, this excellent doctor is prescribing rest and careful following of instructions." "I love you, Harriet." The words, spoken plainly and without preamble, stopped her breath. Thorne continued, his eyes never leaving hers. "Should have told you before I left. Didn't want to burden you if I didn't come back." His grip tightened. "But I'm telling you now. I love you. Have since that first day when you refused to be intimidated by anything not bandits, not the town, not my stubbornness." Tears pricked at Harriet's eyes. "I love you too. You impossible man." His smile was radiant despite his weakened state. "Does that mean you'll marry me? Once I'm back on my feet, well, 1.5 feet?" A laugh bubbled up through her tears. "Is that your idea of a proposal? Not romantic enough?" He tried to look contrite but couldn't hide his smile. "I could try again when I'm not confined to a sickbed." "No," she said, leaning forward to kiss him softly. "It's perfect. And yes, I'll marry you." Their wedding took place the following spring, when wildflowers carpeted the hills around Redemption Creek, and Thorne could walk with only the assistance of a cane. The entire town turned out for the celebration, which lasted well into the night. Standing beside her new husband under a canopy of stars, Harriet felt a sense of completion she'd never expected to find in this dusty frontier town. "Happy?" Thorne asked, his arm around her waist. "Completely," she replied. "Though I'm still keeping my practice. The town needs its doctor." "I wouldn't have it any other way," he assured her. "As long as you come home to me every night." "Always," she promised. Over the years that followed, Harriet and Frank Thorne built a life that balanced her medical practice and his ranching. They expanded both, adding a proper hospital wing to the clinic and increasing the ranch's holdings to become one of the largest in the territory. They had two children, a daughter who would eventually follow her mother into medicine, and a son who combined his father's love of the land with his mother's healing instincts by cultivating medicinal herbs. Frank's leg never fully healed, but Harriet's ongoing therapy greatly reduced his pain and improved his mobility. On their 10th anniversary, he surprised her by dancing a full waltz without his cane, a moment that brought tears to her eyes. "Not bad for a cowboy with a limp," he whispered in her ear as they swayed together. "You've never been just that to me," she replied. "You're the man who let me care for him when he thought he needed no one, the man who taught me that healing goes beyond medicine." As Redemption Creek grew from frontier outpost to thriving town, the Thorns remained at its heart, the doctor who had arrived alone and uncertain, and the wounded rancher who had found in her not pity, but love. Their story became a cornerstone of local lore, told and retold as an example of how the harshest landscapes could nurture the tenderest feelings, how two people damaged by war could build peace together. In the autumn of their lives, they could often be found on the porch of their home, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains. Frank's hand would rest on Harriet's, their fingers intertwined, the familiar touch still sending warmth through both of them. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked her once. "Coming west? Taking a chance on a broken man in a dusty town?" Harriet smiled, the years having only deepened her beauty in his eyes. "Not for a single moment. Some journeys look like wrong turns until you realize they've led you exactly where you needed to be." Frank raised her hand to his lips. "To wrong turns, then. And to caring," she added softly. "Which is just another word for love." As twilight settled over Redemption Creek, they sat in contented silence, surrounded by the life they had built together, a testament to healing, to perseverance, and to the power of caring for someone exactly as they are.